Hello, welcome to ONTIC's Connected Intelligence Podcast. I'm Fred Burton, ONTIC's Executive Director of Protective Intelligence. This podcast offers valuable insights and practical advice to help you navigate the complexities of modern corporate security shared by leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Hi, I'm Fred Burton here today with Bryan Niederhelm. Bryan is the Senior Vice President of Threat Assessment and Management at Gavin de Becker Associates. Bryan is an expert in threat assessment, protective intelligence, and violence prevention. Bryan has led teams responsible for managing thousands of cases involving threats, stalking, workplace violence, and harassment, while also advising organizations and public figures on complex security risks around the world. Bryan is a former U.S. Marine who supported security operations for senior U.S. leaders and diplomats overseas, and he brings decades of experience in protective services and threat management. We're very excited to have Bryan on the show today. Bryan, welcome to the ONTIC Connected Intelligence Podcast.
Let's have some fun, Fred.
Well, first, Bryan, I want to thank you for your wonderful hospitality, seeing your amazing training facility that I've had the opportunity to tour. And I can tell you this, I have never seen anything like it. I'm a graduate of the Secret Service Academy, the State Department Academy, and a few other the alphabet soup places. And what you guys have going is just simply unbelievable. So thank you for your hospitality.
We are definitely proud of what we've built and but also don't like to rest on our laurels and get complacent. So the next time you come back, hopefully for another tour, I can promise you that things will look a little different than your first tour.
That's amazing. Well, let's get started. For listeners who may not know your background, can you introduce yourself, walk us through your career path? I tried to do a little bit of that, so please also tell us what led you to your role at Gavin de Becker Associates.
Well, if we could just skip through my punk childhood, adolescent years and accelerate to 1997 when I found myself standing on the yellow footprints at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. And that's when one might say that my career started in learning how to inflict violence. That's sort of what you're taught. I went into the infantry after boot camp and eventually found my way to military police during a temporary assignment after my deployment, and then to the Marine Security Guard program where I was stationed in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan and Jerusalem, Israel. And still the focus most of that time was learning how to inflict violence. It started to shift a little bit to prevention when I went to the Marine Security Guard program. And that sort of seemed more where I wanted to spend my time, was in the prevention of violence. And so that's what sort of led me to apply at Gavin de Becker Associates, and was ultimately hired in 2002. And I'm still here. They can't get rid of me. I think my career, to just sort of jump over a few steps along the way so that we don't spend the whole time talking about myself, I started as a protector. Eventually I was running the protective security division. And in 2011, Gavin and a few other senior leaders at GDBA saw something in me that I didn't see. And they decided for me to switch from running our protective division to running our threat assessment and management division. And it's been a fun ride. Things have changed quite a lot since 2011. And I've definitely learned more than I was expecting to learn, sort of switching gears. So that's a shortened rundown version about my career. Hopefully that offers enough perspective for you in the audience.
For sure. As you know, the Diplomatic Security Service depends heavily on the Marine Security Guard program that has a long storied history of protecting embassies and consulates and diplomats around the globe. So thank you so much for your service in doing that. Bryan, I know you and we've had countless conversations about this at your wonderful training facility, but when you look at the landscape today, and de Becker is at the cutting edge of this, What feels fundamentally different from even, let's say, 5, 10 years ago?
First, I'd like to just define what fundamental means, because if you just look at the definition of it, it means the most sort of basic root truth level of something. And so what I would challenge people that do what we do, I would say, don't forget fundamentally what hasn't changed. That humans are still motivated by the same things they have been motivated for millennia. So I think what has changed are the factors that influence humans. And obviously we have seen some of that show up in the anti-capitalist movements and the ideological social movements that, in general promote attacks against prominent people, sometimes just because of what they symbolically represent. And so the fact that someone can roll out of bed today and declare themselves as a member of Antifa or whatever fill in the blank group or ideological social movement creates this echo chamber of sorts, and people can adopt these identities and these beliefs, and there's an epidemic, I would say, of uncertainty, and it just causes this angst, I believe, in a lot of people that leads them to want to try to reduce that uncertainty by assuming different identities and feeling like they're in control of things. And certainly social media factors into that equation. And that does change on some level the output, if you will, of the fundamentals. But if you just remember that at the core level, humans haven't changed. We're still, as Gavin says, we are living in space age times with Stone Age minds. Not much has changed. And when you don't forget that, it allows you to better predict and influence human behavior.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, we've seen several high-profile attacks and attempted attacks involving public figures and executives in recent years. How have these incidents like this changed the way protectors think about risk?
Well, hopefully it served as a good reminder to the high-stakes work that we all do. I don't think any protector gets into this work thinking it's a safe job necessarily. So it serves as a good reminder. And I think if we bring it back to sort of the first principles, similar to the point that I just made about not forgetting that at the end of the day, we are talking about humans. Humans are the ones that pose the risks that we're trying to prevent or respond to. And so when you apply that same first principles approach to the question that you just asked, it brings you back to physics and physiology. And that's really what Gavin talks about in just 2 seconds is what are the physics of protection? How can we as protectors stack the odds in our favor by how we can control time and space and distance? And so I think if you just focus on the fundamentals, on the first principles, and you realize the stakes that we're operating in, it motivates you to do such. And then we are enabled to control the situation and enhance our clients' safety more effectively. There was a close protection conference, as you know, IPSB puts on, and I did a presentation on eyesight. I think just drilling into those fundamentals are critical for protectors to give focus and time and energy to, and understanding those things. So hopefully that answers your question on that one.
Very well. And I saw that presentation at the IPSB conference, Bryan, and it was very well done. It's, the scientific approach that GDBA and Gavin has always taken to this has been fascinating for me to watch, having been in this business now for Lord knows how many years it is now. But how is the executive protection kind of traditional image changed? I mean, I know when I first started in this business, the thought of a air quote bodyguard was one that was out there. But I think Gavin was kind of the first in GDBA to kind of change that perception of what protection is.
It's a good question. You would probably have to pool or survey all the prominent people that we protect or could protect in the world to really know how the perception has changed of quote unquote bodyguards. I can tell you how we hope that it has changed and that people are not just wanting to be followed around anymore by some big intimidating looking person, and that they realize that, like anything in life, preparation and the advanced work and being thoughtful and diligent and having the right mindset is more important than the size of the person. Sometimes the actual size of the person can be a detriment in some instances. So we really try to focus on the cerebral side. We say that we're essentially hiring cerebral men and women of action. And I think that will continue to be how we try to evolve the perspective and the rather perception that our clients would have of us and what matters, what's more important. We want them to understand what protection is. And so we'll seek to continue to educate clients. I think that's one of our highest callings as people doing this type of protection work, is to educate our clients on what a good protective detail looks like, and that the planning, the preparation, and how we control the environment, like with the physics, like how, if it's a stage, how do we set up the stage? Why is white space important? How do the physics of protection work against them? And if we are not able to be within a certain distance to them, what disadvantages does that create? Teaching them about the statistics and the physics surrounding arrivals and departures from a vehicle. We know after studying more than 1,500 attacks that more than 64% of the attacks happen in or around the vehicle, or when the protectee is in or around the vehicle. And we know that more than 70% of those are successful. So when you start to tell clients some of that stuff, it changes their view, and they start to see us more than a bodyguard.
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I wanted to tell you about ONTIC resources. In the world of safety, security, and protection, we know that gathering and sharing information is crucial. That is why we created our Resource Center as a hub for security strategies, best practices, and tools and tips to do your job more efficiently. Take a look at our articles, checklists, guides, industry frameworks, and more. Check out the link in the episode description to visit ONTIC resources, or visit ontic.co/resources. Now, Bryan, you lead GDBA's AI think tank. What emerging technologies are having the biggest impact on executive protection and protective intelligence right now in your assessment?
Technology in the traditional sense, I don't know it has made that big of an impact yet. I mean, we've been studying drones for a decade now. I'm a little surprised that drones have not been used in an attack.
Me too.
We are building our own custom large language model at GDBA. And we expected that to help in ways with protective intelligence and other threat assessment work that we do in doing things that the human is just incapable of doing, in terms of connecting dots and seeing information and being able to digest large pieces of information and make connections. So there's a lot of technology at our client properties when we're protecting them at home. There's video analytics and there's all these, but yeah, you got a tour of our office and you saw some of the older technologies where a map display or even just a label and an LED is labeled for each zone on a property. the fancy Crestrons and the fancy touch panels today sort of do the same thing. Not quite as sexy looking, but so I don't know how much technology, when it comes to close protection, I don't know how much technology has actually changed. And I would encourage people to look at the fundamentals, to use that word again, and to understand that actually there's more that hasn't changed than has. That doesn't mean, obviously, we created an AI think tank. So we're certainly thinking about the stuff and we're trying to anticipate. We want to understand, like, the two questions that our AI think tank is asking ourselves every time that we convene is, how can we use AI better to protect our clients? And how can AI be used against our clients? Those are the two questions. That's our mission every time. And yeah, there's deep fakes and there's voice cloning and there's lots of stuff like that that might help in virtual kidnappings. But when it comes to close protection, I don't know there's a ton of technology out there that's actually changed the game all that much. And I think it's important to focus on the fundamentals still, the physics of close protection.
Yeah, what is old is new again, right? It's kind of like Shakespeare's "What is past is prologue." And, I worked a case back in the day where an Israeli diplomat was assassinated on his front lawn in Bethesda, Maryland. And the pursuers, the terrorist organization that carried out the attack, just looked up his address in the old school telephone book and was able to find him that way. So it's fascinating to me. And as organizations adapt more advanced technologies, how do you avoid becoming overly reliant on tools and losing that human element of protection?
I'm going to maybe give you a bit of a theoretical and or esoteric answer on this one, but I think it's mindfulness. As protectors, we have to be mindful. We cannot get wrapped up or distracted by the shiny objects. We can't forget and overlook that humans are still humans and we still have the same proclivities. We still have the same tendencies, the same cognitive biases. We still have eyesight, but we lack relevant insight. And so it's really important to just remind yourself of that. Whatever a protector has to do in order to operate at the optimal level. You saw some of the things when you left the office, our training facility a couple of weeks ago. We gave you some parting gifts in the way of protector bars.
Thank you for that, by the way.
And little packets of creatine with sodium. So if you're not working in an organization like GDBA that has all these systems and is essentially giving people the proper nutrition, is giving them the tools to stay mindful, is constantly reminding them, for us, we have an intranet that every single day they log in, they have to answer questions. They have to watch what we call invisible quality moment videos, where they're reminded about how some of the qualities like readiness and preparation are so critical to the work that we do. So we're basically creating the water that all of the associates are swimming in is one of readiness, of preparation, of integrity, of all these values. And if you're a protector that's working on an independent team, or you're an independent contractor, you have to have a lot of discipline to build those same systems into your life, to have mindfulness, to not be overly distracted by the information that's out there or by requests that are coming in from the client that pull you out of your protective mission. It requires a lot of discipline. At GDBA, I think we've sort of figured out what the secret sauce is. We figured out what the systems are to try to do what we can to keep people in the right mindset. So that's how I would answer it. I think other people would probably have many other answers to that question. It's a good question. I don't think there is one perfect approach to it.
Bryan, for younger professionals entering the field, what skills will matter most in the next generation of protective intelligence and executive protection personnel?
Let's use first principles again, because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think anyone that believes they have the answer to that is setting themselves up for failure. Curiosity is going to be one of the most valuable attributes in the future. Questioning our own beliefs, our own views, what we once believed is best is not going to be best in a few days, even potentially. There was a book written by Liz Wiseman called Rookie Smarts, and it talks about how expertise is so perishable now more than ever. I think the statistics that she gave after reviewing a bunch of data was that about 15% of our current day expertise will still be relevant in 5 years. So I do think that the protection field is unique, and maybe those statistics don't apply exactly the way that they do, generally speaking, to a field like in some sort of medicine or artificial intelligence. But I do think it's important that as protective professionals, we need to constantly have an open mind to question our own expertise and what's relevant today. And just the way, because we've been doing something for all these years a certain way, is that still the best way? Or do we need to evolve something so that we can better protect our clients? So it requires that we put our egos aside. It requires that we don't allow our own experience to become, or rather to create some blindness. Because once you get a lot of experience at something, you start to do it subconsciously. That's not always a bad thing, but it can be. It could literally create blind spots. So that's what I would say is the most relevant thing to consider as you're contemplating that topic right now.
And for those individuals that will be watching this and that are interested in joining GDBA as a protector, what's the process?
Well, the website is primarily focused on educating associates or future associates of GDBA. We don't really have a website that's designed to attract new clients. Our website is very specifically built to educate people who might be interested in the work that we do. So just go on to gdba.com. And if you take advantage of all the resources and the information that we have on the website, it's going to walk you through the whole process. We do have some unique ways that we approach things, but someone who's listening to this, that's the place to go. I'll give you an example, though, of one of the creative ways that we approach recruitment is we have these things called preferred candidate cards, and we give them out to all of our associates. I've given a preferred candidate card to a waiter that was serving my family just because of the professionalism, the way they carried themselves with confidence, and the way that they spoke clearly. So there's certain skills that we're looking for that are more important in some cases than experience and protection of being traveling all over the world with clients, or being a law enforcement officer, or coming from the military. Those things are great. In some cases, we actually have to untrain people with some of those backgrounds when they come, because the strategies of protecting public figures can be the antithesis to an offensive mindset when you're in the military or law enforcement. And if you are making, in the few seconds that exist for us to respond effectively to prevent an attack, if your instinct is to do something that is offensive, you might have just lost the 1 or 2 seconds that you needed to protect the client. So lots of information, some of which I just even shared, where we're educating potential candidates about the work that we do, about the company, about the culture. So again, just go to gdba.com. Lots more information that they can get that would take us way too long to talk about here, but it's a great source.
Bryan, in closing, we ask every one of our guests this question, so bear with me, and I'm not putting you on the hot seat. What does the phrase connected intelligence mean to you?
I'm thinking out loud a little bit here, but that I think is going to be a multi-part answer, but I'll try to make it fast. So connected intelligence The first thing that would pop into mind might be sharing intelligence, right? A individual or a group or an agency sharing information with another agency so that the proper dots can be connected. In a technology context, you need to integrate systems so that intelligence can be connected. But then there's probably two unconventional meanings that hopefully will make sense. Let's see where this goes. So there is an interdisciplinary approach to this work that we do that I think is overlooked. One example would be a book written by Peter Bernstein called Against the Gods, and it gives you this whole history of risk management. He happens to be looking at it through the lens of financial risk management. That's where he became an expert. As protectors managing the safety risks that we are, our industry is not as mature as the financial risk management industry. And it's also, it doesn't give us the language in order to communicate to clients. Because if we're needing to recruit the cooperation of our clients into our recommendations, we need to speak their language. So understanding how to speak about risk management in their language, but then translate it to the protective context can be really useful to get them on board with our recommendations so that we can better protect them. And then the last thing that pops into my mind right now is a concept or a methodology that China uses in gathering intelligence that I think is another good way to think about connected intelligence. And it's called 1,000 grains of sand. You've probably heard of it given your long history. And what China does, that's a little different from Western intelligence agencies, is they don't even know sometimes why they're gathering certain intelligence. They're just gathering 1,000 grains of sand. And that's what we have to do. Even though something gets our intuition and we might just sort of write it off as something that's not concerning and the brain does what it does and assigns alibis to things, it's our job to not question that, to just honor the intuition and get that information to whatever apparatus, in the case of GDBA, our Threat Assessment and Management Division, and we will create a file and we will add that grain of sand into our database, even though we might not have anything to connect it to yet. In the future, who knows if it's 1 day, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, that little grain of sand might connect to something that's incredibly relevant. So that's maybe a slightly different way of thinking about connected intelligence.
Very well said. Bryan, I want to thank you for being on the OnTIC Connected Intelligence podcast, and obviously for your wonderful hospitality and visiting your amazing training facility. And I hope to see you again soon.
Likewise, Fred. We will see each other soon.
Take care. Thanks for listening in. To find more episodes, visit us at ontic.co/podcasts. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice. Know someone who would be a great podcast guest or have questions you'd like us to answer? Email us at podcast@ontic.co. This episode was produced by AJ McKeon, and I'm Fred Burton. Thanks for listening.